"We did an order for your son," my sister said, handing him a bread basket while her kids ate $100 steaks and dessert. My dad added, "You should have packed him something." I just smiled and said noted. When the waiter came back, I stood up and announced, "I've spent most of my adult life cleaning up after my sister's messes. Financial, emotional, even babysitting her kids while she went on her last-minute emergency getaways. I did it without much thanks." Always hearing the same line from our parents. "She's going through a lot." As if I wasn't. Jill's life has always been one dramatic mess after another, but somehow she still manages to land softly because someone else is always catching her. Usually me and our parents. They act like she's this fragile, helpless creature who can't be held accountable for anything. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. The Grandview Yacht Club sits at the very edge of the harbor, the kind of place where the membership dues cost more than most people's cars, and the sunset feels like something you have to pay extra to witness. The air smells of salt water and expensive perfume. A thick, cloying mix that always makes my throat tight. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. My father, Christopher, was finally retiring after 40 years in corporate law, a career he wore like armor. My mother, Patricia, had been planning this dinner for 6 months, curating every detail from the floral centerpieces to the seating chart. And that chart was the first sign that tonight wasn't just about celebration, it was about hierarchy. The main table was set for 6, my parents at the head, naturally. My sister Brittany and her latest boyfriend on one side, my Uncle William and his wife on the other. And then a few feet away, tucked near the service entrance and the swinging kitchen doors, was a small round table. For 2, me and my 6-year-old son Jacob. I tried to ignore the slight. I tried to tell myself it was just logistics, that the main table was full. But then the food started arriving for the main table. A parade of luxury seafood towers dripping with ice and condensation, oysters, freshly shucked bottles of vintage wine that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The waiters moved with the silent efficiency of well-oiled machines, placing plates of filet mignon and lobster tails in front of my parents and sister. Brittany, who calls herself a lifestyle influencer but mostly influences my bank account balance to drop, was already snapping photos, her phone hovering over the food, capturing the perfect angle of abundance. And then there was our table. Jacob sat quietly, his hands folded in his lap, watching the feast unfold just a few feet away. He was wearing his best shirt, the little blue button-down he loved, because it made him look like a grown-up. He hadn't complained when we were seated apart. He hadn't complained when the waiters breezed past us with the appetizers. But when the main course arrived at the big table and nothing came to ours, he looked up at me, his eyes wide and confused. "Mom," he whispered, "is our food coming soon? I'm really hungry." I waved a waiter down, forcing a polite smile. "Excuse me, I think you missed our order. My son and I would like to see a menu." The waiter looked uncomfortable, his gaze darting toward my father. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I was told the tasting menu was for the main table only. Your father said you weren't included in the head count for the dinner service." My stomach dropped. I looked over at the main table. My father was slicing into a steak, not even looking in our direction. My mother was laughing at something, Brittany said, her wine glass catching the dying light of the sundae. I stood up and walked over to them. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice low. "Jacob is hungry. Why weren't we included in the order?" My father didn't stop eating. He chewed slowly, swallowed, and then finally looked at me with eyes that were cold and flat. "It's a fixed-price menu. Emily's $500. We didn't think it was necessary to spend that kind of money on a 6-year-old who won't appreciate the truffle oil. Besides, things are tight right now. With the retirement transition, things were tight." This from the man wearing a watch worth $15,000. This from the family sitting in a private club eating gold-flecked dessert. Brittany chimed in then, her mouth full of lobster. "Just give him some bread. He loves bread." She grabbed the bread basket from the center of the table, the free bread basket, and thrust it toward me. Here, problem solved. Under the table, I saw her hand slip a piece of prime steak to her Pomeranian, Coco, who who was sitting in a designer carrier at her feet. The dog got steak. My son got bread. I stood there holding the basket of cold rolls, and something inside me finally snapped. But it wasn't a loud snap. It wasn't a scream or a cry. It was the quiet, terrifying sound of a foundation cracking. I looked at my son, who was watching me with hopeful eyes, waiting for his mother to fix this, to protect him. And then I looked at my family. My sister feeding a dog better than her nephew. My parents who saw my son, not as a person, but as an unnecessary expense. For years I had swallowed these indignities. I had told myself that this was just how they were, that if I was patient enough, good enough, generous enough, they would eventually love us the way they loved Brittany. It's funny how the brain protects you. It normalizes the abnormal until you forget what healthy looks like when you grow up in a freezer. You don't realize you're shivering, you just think that's what weather is. You think the numbness in your fingers and the chattering of your teeth are just part of being alive. You learn to put on extra layers, to huddle in on yourself, to make yourself small so the cold can't find as much surface area to bite. I had spent 29 years making myself small. I had spent 29 years apologizing for taking up space, or having needs for existing. I had convinced myself that their cruelty was just a different kind of love, a tough love, a love that demanded I earn my keep. But looking at Jacob holding a bread roll like it was a consolation prize for being born, the temperature suddenly changed. I stepped out of the freezer, and for the first time in my life, I felt the heat. It was burning me up from the inside out. Not anger. Anger is messy. Anger is loud. This was rage. Cold, clear, absolute rage. I smiled at my sister. I smiled at my father. Noted, I said, and I walked back to my table. I sat down across from Jacob and put the bread basket aside. He looked at me, worried. Mom, are you okay? I reached across the table and took his hand. I'm better than okay, baby, I'm awake. I signaled the waiter again. This time I didn't wave politely. I raised my hand with the authority of someone who was done asking for permission when he arrived, looking nervous. I didn't whisper. I spoke clearly, loudly, my voice carrying over the clinking silverware and polite chatter of the yacht club terrace. I'd like to place an order, I said. The waiter glanced at my father again, but I snapped my fingers to bring his attention back to me eyes. On me, please. We're not ordering from the set menu, we're ordering a la carte, and we're putting it on the member account. My father's head whipped around. Emily, what do you think you're doing? I ignored him. For my son, I said he'll have the Wagyu ribeye, medium rare, the 14-ounce cut, and add the lobster tail. Oh, and a side of the truffle mac and cheese. And for dessert, the chocolate souffle. Make sure it's the large one. The waiter froze, his pen hovering over his pad. He looked terrified. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her pearls in a gesture that would have been comical if it wasn't so pathetic. Emily, that's a $200 steak. He's 6. I turned to her then. My voice was calm, conversational, deadly. I know, Mom, but since things are so tight, I figured I'd help you out. See, I'm canceling the rest of your course service. I turned back to the waiter. Cancel the vintage Cabernet they ordered for the toast. Cancel the seafood tower refill. Cancel the dessert course for the main table. In fact, cancel everything that hasn't physically left the kitchen yet. My father stood up, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. You can't do that. That's my account actually, Dad, I said, meeting his eyes. It's a family account. You added me as an authorized user 3 years ago when you needed me to pick up your dry cleaning and run your errands because you were too busy being important. You never removed me, so technically I can order whatever I want. And right now, I want my son to have a steak, and I want you to watch him eat it. Silence descended on the terrace. The table of bankers next to us had stopped talking. The couple by the railing was staring. My sister looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Uncle William, who had been quietly observing the entire evening, took a sip of his water and hid a smile behind his glass. The waiter looked at my father, then at me. He saw the steel in my spine. He saw that I wasn't the same daughter who had walked in an hour ago. He nodded once. Right away, ma'am. And he walked off toward the kitchen. I sat back in my chair and unfolded my napkin. Jacob looked at me, his eyes wide. Mom is Grandpa. Mad. I smiled at him, a real smile this time. It doesn't matter, sweetie. Tonight we feast. And as the waiter brought out the sizzling steak, placing it in front of my son with a flourish usually reserved for royalty, I watched my family. They sat in stunned silence, their own plates suddenly looking less appetizing. They were realizing that the dynamic had shifted. The ATM was out of order. The doormat had grown spikes, and the bill was finally coming due. The aftermath of the dinner was exactly what you'd expect from people who value appearance over substance. The drive home was quiet, but my phone was not. It vibrated against the console of my car like a trapped insect buzzing with incoming notifications. I didn't look at it. I focused on the road, on the rhythm of the street lights passing overhead, on the soft breathing of Jacob, asleep in the back seat. His belly was full of Wagyu beef and chocolate, and he was dreaming the peaceful dreams of a child who knows he is safe. I wished I could say the same for myself. When I finally pulled into my driveway and carried Jacob to bed, I sat down at my kitchen counter and poured myself a glass of tap water. The silence of my house usually felt lonely tonight. It felt heavy, pregnant with the realization of what I had just done. I had publicly humiliated my father. I had stolen control from my mother. I had openly defied the family hierarchy. In their world, these were capital offenses. I unlocked my phone. The first text was from Brittany. You are psychotic. You ruined Dad's night. Everyone is talking about how crazy you acted. Send me $500 for the cancellation fees, or I'm telling everyone you had a mental breakdown. The second was from my mother. I don't know who you think you are, but you are not the daughter I raised. You embarrassed us in front of the entire club. Fix this now. The third was from my father. A simple notification from the bank. Access revoked. He had removed me from the family account before the dessert plates were even cleared. I laughed. A dry, humorless sound in the empty kitchen. They thought this was about money. They thought they could punish me by cutting off access to an account I never used for myself anyway. They didn't understand. I wasn't trying to spend their money. I was trying to show them that I was done spending mine. I opened my laptop and created a new spreadsheet. I titled it the ransom. For years, I had been the safety net, the backup plan, the silent investor in the business of Brittany's life. My parents constantly told me that family helps family. What they meant was that I helped Brittany. Brittany needed a new car because her image as an influencer depended on it. I co-signed the loan. Brittany maxed out her credit cards on a business trip to Tulum. I transferred the balance to my card to save her credit score. Brittany couldn't make rent because her brand deals fell through. I wrote the check. I started typing every transaction, every transfer, every loan that was never repaid. November 2021 rent assistance $1,200, January 2022 car repair $850, March 2022 emergency credit card payoff $4,500, July 2022 bailout for the failed jewelry line. Launch $3,000. The list went on. And on. I pulled up my bank statements cross-referencing dates and amounts. The total at the bottom of the column grew larger and larger until it stared back at me. A 5-figure indictment of my own stupidity. $18,500, $18,500. That was a down payment on a house. That was a college fund for Jacob. That was a year of freedom, and I had given it away piece by piece, buying a seat at a table where I wasn't even allowed to eat. I realized then what it was. It wasn't charity. It wasn't generosity. It was a ransom. I had been paying a ransom for a hostage, my family's love that was never alive to begin with. I thought if I paid enough, if I saved them enough times, if I was useful enough, they would finally look at me and see a daughter. They would see a sister. But you can't buy what isn't for sale, and you can't save people who don't want to be saved. You can only drown with them. I looked at the total again. $18,500. That money was gone. I knew I would probably never see it again, but I could stop the bleeding. I could stop paying the ransom. I opened my email and composed a new message. Subject to financial independence to Brittany, Mom, Dad, CC, Uncle William. Effective immediately. I am ceasing all financial support for Brittany. The car loan I co-signed will need to be refinanced in her name within 30 days, or I will contact the lender to discuss options for removal, including voluntary repossession if payments are missed. The credit card balance transfer is due in full. I am no longer the family.